Good morning, everyone. My name is Jake Marcinko. I am the technical product manager for the council, and I'm here today to talk about, to discuss the value proposition of the software security framework. But I want to do it in a way that's a little bit more fun and interactive, so we're going to really pick up the energy level in this session today. But before we get into that, I wanted to just take a poll here. Is anyone else here a big fan of TV crime drama? Anyone like that genre of television? No one? Okay, this is going to be a boring session then. I myself am a huge fan. I love TV crime drama, true crime. Watch quite a bit of it. I'm actually a little bit embarrassed about the number of TV shows that I've watched. For me, it all started really back in the early 90s with Law and Order. Then it transitioned over to NYPD Blue, NCIS. I even got into the whole CSI series, CSI Miami, CSI New York. There's a theme here, CSI Cyber. But I'm not limiting myself to just the US market. I've also gotten into British TV crime shows, such as Prime Suspect, Inspector Morse, Inspector Lewis. I've even watched the prequel to the Inspector Morse series with Endeavor. Some of the newer TV shows like Shetland, Annika, and Broadchurch. But again, I've not limited myself to certain markets. I've even gotten into the whole Nordic Noir series, with shows like Ofereth, or at least in the North American market, it's rebranded as Trapped, and Brot, or the Valhalla Murders. But again, I've even delved into French language TV crime dramas with shows like Alex Hugo, and the creme de la creme of cheesy crime TV, Profilage. So given my appreciation for TV crime dramas, I thought it would be actually fun and interesting to demonstrate the value of the PCI software security framework through the view of a cheesy TV crime show. So everyone, welcome to CSI PCI. So I'll be your host today, and what we'll do is we'll collectively work to solve a fictitious cyber incident based on real-world events. To make things a little bit more interactive, we're going to add a little gameplay inspired by the game Cluedo, or for you folks in North America, Clue. And then I'm also going to solicit a little help from a well-known expert for you CSI fans, Lieutenant Horatio Kane from CSI Miami.
And this is my crime scene now.
So the rules are simple. I'm going to present the details of an attack scenario, again based on real-world events, and you're going to help me determine who carried out the attack and how. Now there are 5 potential suspects and 5 suspected attack methods. And you know we love a good Slido poll here at the council, so we'll use Slido to help track what you think are the most likely attack methods and attackers. So get your phones ready until then, but does everyone understand the rules? Does it sound good? All right, here we go. Okay, everyone, we have a code red situation. This is a full-scale incident. No one can leave until we determine what happened. So here's what we know so far. Customers are reporting that the latest software auto update is triggering a high degree of anti-malware alerts in the environment. Now, the malware seems to be communicating with some infrastructure that was assigned to a domain that was registered just 10 days ago. All communications between the malware and the servers is encrypted, so we have no visibility into that. Now about the software that's been compromised. It's a client-side app with a services backend. All of the software code is stored in GitHub Enterprise. We use Jenkins to compile, sign, and deploy the code to a secure update server. And all code signing keys are stored in a secure HSM. So we have to figure out how was the malware, or how was the software compromised. So in terms of determining what the main point of attack is, here's the evidence we've collected so far. So we have critical CVE alerts for 2 third-party libraries that are embedded in the client-side code. But we also have a client-side software dependency on a separate third-party library that's been deprecated. We also have some client-side code that contains a maliciously altered third-party library. So these 3 pieces of evidence seem to indicate that it's one or more third-party libraries that have been used as the primary point of compromise. However, we have some other evidence. We have an exposed critical vulnerability in the server-side code for the API report endpoint. A previous API source code review confirmed that the application processes unsanitized user input. And then we also have some pen test evidence that confirms the API endpoint may not perform proper authorization checks before returning sensitive data. So these 3 pieces of evidence seem to indicate that it's a vulnerable API endpoint that was the primary point of compromise.
Looks can be deceiving, man.
But there's more. We also have evidence that code signing certificates have been copied from the secure HSMs to network shares for convenience purposes. We have system monitoring logs that show suspicious signing activity occurring. And we also have external reports indicating that malware was signed with a company code signing certificate. And this list of evidence seems to indicate that it's actually a compromised code signing certificate that might be the primary attack vector. But we also have some other evidence. We have numerous phishing emails that have been intercepted that have been targeting DevOps personnel. We have network logs that show several DevOps accounts with repeated failed login attempts followed by a success. And we have multiple password reset attempts for a handful of DevOps accounts. So this all seems to suggest that it's been admin credentials that have been stolen as the primary attack vector.
I guess we can't rule out exposure.
That is true. That is true. It's a good point. And finally, the last bit of evidence we've collected, we have build logs that show logins from unfamiliar foreign IP addresses at odd hours of the day. We also noted that multi-factor authentication has been turned off for certain build server accounts. And we have build logs showing unusual child processes like encoded PowerShell commands. And this all seems to suggest that it was actually a build server that was the primary point of compromise. So here's your opportunity to weigh in. Based on this evidence, well, that's not helpful. It's supposed to be an attack poll. It seems our poll is not working. So who here thinks we'll do this manually. Who here thinks that it was a compromised code signing certificate as a primary attack method? No? Oh, we got it good. Okay, good. It is working. So take out your phones and scan the QR code, and then based on the evidence, let's look to see what the group thinks might be, again, the primary point of compromise, not necessarily a secondary. This is always fascinating. I think based on this, we have a clear winner here. So stolen credentials. That seems to be what the group thinks is. So let's back it up and see if we can rule anything out. So starting with insecure third-party libraries. They are definitely dangerous, but they are usually exploited at runtime. It would be difficult to achieve the same scale that we've seen in the attack using runtime exploits on client-side code. And while it is a possible future target vector, the evidence seems to point to some other root cause. So I think we can rule out an insecure client-side library. So what other attack vectors can we rule out? Well, insecure APIs are also typically exploited at runtime. And while they may be able to execute arbitrary code, it would make for an impractical attack at this scale. So that rules out an insecure API. And while these are obviously factors in this attack, neither a compromised code signing certificate nor stolen DevOps credentials would be the primary cause of malware to be distributed at this scale. So therefore, the most likely main point of compromise is the compromised build server. Now, it seems that the attackers were able to compromise the build server, were able to compromise legitimate user credentials to the environment and the build server. So you're technically not wrong, which is from the poll. The method used to obtain the credentials was a targeted phishing attack. So once the attackers had access to the build server, they could pretty much do anything to the build server that they wanted. But who would carry out such an attack and why?
And that is what we focus on.
So let's now shift gears and look at who we think might have carried out this attack. And again, we have 5 potential suspects here. So here's what we know. We have git diffs showing dependency changes pushed to the main branch of code without pull requests or evidence of any sort of code review. We're seeing commits pushed from inactive and on-leave DevOps accounts. And then we have identity servers are indicating that broad admin rights were recently granted to a handful of dormant DevOps accounts. So all of this seems to point to an inside job, an insider threat. However, we have disk images from the build server that contain known ransomware code fragments in the same directory as the malware. We have the presence of code snippets from ransomware note templates also in malware. And we have outbound traffic traced to a domain that was registered just 10 days ago. So all of this resembles common ransomware gang behavior. However, we have some other evidence. We have a well-crafted phishing email campaign targeting DevOps team members that was received and identified just last week. The malware signatures overlap with known ATP toolkits. And the malware beaconing matches suspected nation-state infrastructure. So the sophistication of this evidence suggests a potential nation-state actor. We have some more evidence. We have known hacktivist social media and forum accounts claiming responsibility for the attack. We have ideological slogans in the malware fragments. There is also some defacement functionality included in the malware. So this all seems to suggest a hacktivist or hacktivism organization as the likely culprit. And then the last bit of evidence, we have anonymous leaks to the press about undisclosed software vulnerabilities. This seems to have intentional effort to damage our company reputation. We have checksums for several third-party components that don't match what was approved. And then we have code snippets from the build server with intentional performance degradation functionality, like intentional memory leaks and backdoors, etc. So all this seems to imply a corporate saboteur or a competitor. So back to the Slido poll. Who do you think was the most likely perpetrator for this attack? Wow, it is jumping everywhere. We have one that's surging ahead. I'll give it another minute or second here. All right, I think this has settled down a little bit. So, ransomware gang or an insider threat seems to be the consensus here. Okay, well, let's do the same thing. Let's see if we can rule any of these out. So there's evidence of attempts to damage the organization's reputation. So that, again, would imply a corporate saboteur. However, the degree of sophistication, stealthiness, and the scale of this attack would imply other motivations besides corporate sabotage. So that likely rules out the saboteur. Additionally, the scale and sophistication also seems implausible for an insider. So that likely rules out insider threat.
Robbery was not the motive.
No, I don't think robbery was the motive here. So let's look at some of these others. So that leaves us really with three types of organizations, all of which that possess the degree of sophistication exhibited in this attack. However, the presence of both ransomware and ideological code snippets seems a little suspicious. Maybe a false flag? And the targeted and sophisticated nature of the phishing campaign, along with the malware traffic patterns, really only points to one type of organization, and that is a nation-state actor. So why would a nation-state want to carry out an attack like this? Well, it's really tough to interpret the motivation of a nation-state actor. However, one can interpret from the evidence that the attacked organization may not be the primary target. It's possible that the intent of the attack is to poison the software supply chain upstream from the actual intended target or targets. And that would be similar to the SolarWinds and 3CX attacks in 2020 and 2023, respectively. So this brings us to the point of this session today. What are you doing to protect your organization from attacks and attackers like these? Now, I'm sure many people here are relying on PCI DSS controls to help protect their environments. But what are you doing to protect your software products and the software supply chain? There was some data released recently that indicates that software-based attacks now are the primary main point of compromise, exceeding network-based attacks. So how are you demonstrating your software security capabilities to your customers and partners? Well, that is what the PCI Software Security Framework is for. Now, the Software Security Framework, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is comprised of two standards, the Secure Software Standard and the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard. Now, the Secure Software Standard defines requirements for ensuring that software sufficiently protects sensitive assets. And then the Secure Software Lifecycle Standard defines requirements for ensuring that software vendors' SDLC processes incorporate appropriate security practices. So the collective software security framework also includes mature validation programs and listings. And we think that that's what differentiates us from other standards and software standards and frameworks. So in many ways, our listings are a little bit like a nutritional label for software products and the SDLC practices of their producers. It provides information about what was evaluated, the scope of the assessment, and the high-level assessment results. Now, stakeholders can use this information to make informed business decisions about the security of those products and their vendors. And when you combine this with PCI DSS, our validation programs provide even greater assurance and insight. And we're continuing to make significant improvements in version 2.0, which we're planning on releasing at the beginning of next year, or at sometime before the end of the year or the beginning of next year. Now, some of the changes include further clarifying the concept of sensitive assets, which is a foundational concept within the software security framework. We're also providing additional documentation to clarify important terms and to demonstrate how all of these concepts fit together. We're also revamping the listing management process to better accommodate software and listing updates. And we are finally reintroducing wildcarding for both qualified and non-qualified SLC vendors. So those organizations who undergo secure software lifecycle validation, historically were given, they have additional benefits within the context of the software security program. But in terms of wildcarding, we are going to support wildcarding for both SLC qualified and non-qualified vendors. And we're getting rid of the mandatory requirement for full assessments of high-impact changes. In fact, we're replacing that whole high-low impact nomenclature with the concept of Tier 1 and Tier 2 deltas. So there is no full software assessment for interim updates. The only full software assessment is when you do the initial assessment, and then obviously when that validation comes due 3 years later. And we're also expanding the types of deltas that can be performed by secure SLC qualified vendors. And we're also working to leverage secure software and secure SLC validation in the context of other PCI SSE standards and programs to provide additional benefits in these programs, programs such as MPOC and point-to-point encryption. So if you'd like to learn more about the PCI software security framework and how validation under the framework can benefit your organization, you can reach out to me via this email address on the screen. Or if you want to find me in the vendor showcase later today, I'd be happy to talk to you about the software security framework and give you more information. So with that, thank you for your participation, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thanks, everyone.